Have you ever hit a goal, a real one, something that you actually worked for, and then stood there in the quiet afterward wondering why it didn't feel the way you thought it would? And have you ever asked yourself, maybe late at night or in a moment that you didn't plan for, not what do I want to achieve next, but something deeper, something harder to answer, like what is this all actually for? If either of those questions sounds familiar, this episode is for you. Today, we're going to look honestly at the difference between achievement and meaning, not to tear down ambition. Ambition's real and it matters, but to understand what happens when it stops being enough on its own. We're going to talk about the first mountain, that long climb towards success, recognition, and proving yourself. Then we're going to talk about what I'm calling the second mountain and why so many driven people eventually find themselves standing at its base, wondering what it even means to climb again. We'll get into why success can leave a gap, what meaningful work actually is, and what the shift looks like from the inside. Today, we're going to talk about the second mountain, what comes after success. And I want to start by saying that this one's a little different. It's not a tactical episode, there's no framework, there's no five-step system, no checklist at the end. What it is, and what I'm hoping it is a real conversation about something that a lot of ambitious people feel, but don't always have the language for. The metaphor of the second mountain is a simple one. The first mountain is the climb that most of us start early, building skills, chasing goals, proving ourselves, creating stability, earning recognition, mastering our craft. The second mountain is what some people discover is waiting on the other side. Once they've climbed the first one or gotten most of the way up and realize that the view from the top isn't quite what they imagined. This episode connects to a topic that I spend a lot of time thinking and writing about, which is purpose and meaningful work. The idea that the kind of work you do and why you do it is not separate from the quality of your life. If you want to go deeper on that, I put together a full resource at optimize.com. The first mountain is not a villain in this story. I want to say that clearly before we go anywhere else, because ambition is not the problem. Striving is not the problem. Wanting to build something, be good at something, create security, earn recognition, leave a mark, those are real, legitimate human drives. And dismissing them as shallow is its own kind of dishonesty. The first mountain is where most of us spend the first big chapter of our working lives, and it is valuable. It teaches you who you are under pressure. It gives you competence. It builds confidence. It creates options. It connects you to work that stretches you, to communities of people who are serious about something, to a sense of forward momentum that's really genuinely satisfying. The first mountain asks a specific question: what can I accomplish? And there's nothing wrong with that question. It's a good question. It drives people to build remarkable things, to develop serious skills, to create businesses and careers and art and technology that wouldn't exist without it. But, and here's where it gets interesting, the first mountain is at its core largely about you. It's about what you can prove, what you can earn, what you can achieve, what you can accumulate, what you can become in the eyes of others or in your own eyes. It's about your ascent. And for a lot of people, ambitious, capable, hardworking people, that works beautifully for a long time until one day it doesn't. So I know for me, starting off with my digital business, I spent a lot of time, I worked really hard, and my focus was so singular on just trying to build what I was doing that once I had made the decision to start the business, I didn't really consider anything else. Now, for me, part of the impetus to start it was the fact that I wanted a better life for me and my family, but more importantly, a lifestyle, right? I didn't want to be living, traveling all over the world, doing a job, earning money for my family back home, and not being there to be there with them and enjoy it. So I wanted to create that life and that lifestyle for the entire family. And I worked really hard at that, but making it for me was sort of the image of having enough money that I had control over, that I could generate enough that I could live with the freedom of lifestyle that I wanted. If I wanted to go and chaperone field trips and, take my kids to their athletics events and stuff like that, I was around to be able to do all that. I knew a lot of moms and dads that their kids, we had to pick them up on the way because they weren't there and able to do it. They were at work. And so that for me was sort of the point that I was reaching for, because I really wanted to be there. And I was so focused on it because once I started, I put my head down and I wasn't really looking around anymore. I was focused on it. I was trying to build momentum, and it felt really good making all those early strides. Every new milestone, every time I hit a new plateau or felt as though I broke through another thing, I always felt really good about that. I was learning new things all the time. I was making money and it was growing. And so that was building my confidence. I was starting to feel more independent. I was starting to feel better financially because I felt as though I'm getting closer to a place where I can be comfortable and I don't always need to grind. It created options for me because I had lots of different ways that I could take the business and what I was doing. And I felt good about the work that I was doing because it was something that I sort of created. Right. And so that was all really cool. But it was interesting to me because I never stopped to reflect once I started doing that. And so, that first mountain isn't necessarily a phase, right? Because even people on the second mountain still care about that. It isn't like you let go of ambition. You stop learning, you stop developing, or you don't care anymore because all you can think about is purpose. All of the first mountain stuff still matters. It's just that where it becomes dangerous is when it's the only mountain that we're climbing. Because then we get to a point at some place in our lives where we start to wonder what the point was for everything, where the value is. We don't feel fulfilled even though we have everything outwardly that people would think of as successful. And so, you know, building your craft, wanting to be excellent at things, building things, all of that kind of stuff is valuable, but so is aligning with something that has meaning for you, aligning with something that makes you feel purposeful for your life and gives you a value to who you are beyond what you just accomplish. And so the challenge is that which mountain is leading, right? That's really the challenge. If you're on mountain one and you're still ascending in your career, it totally makes sense. It doesn't mean you can't stop and look back and look around and see if what you're doing aligns with who you are. Clearly, if you've already accomplished that, it's super important to be able to do that. And so the first mountain is also, right, it's a badge of courage, right? It's one of those things where it's culturally acceptable. Everybody wants, achievement is the focus of everything. Metrics, promotions, revenue, followers, credentials. If you're doing any of those things, it's easy to stay oriented to them because the scoreboard's always visible, and generally it's often comparative, right? Whether or not you feel competition with your friends and family, there's sort of that benchmark where we measure people. And so, like it or not, that is sort of, the easy way, and it's socially acceptable. So it makes that mountain very easy. The first mountain scoreboard, will let you know where you stand. And for a long time, that can be comforting in and of itself. But there does come a point, and it happens differently for everyone, where the scoreboard itself starts to feel less satisfying than it used to. Maybe it's because you hit the goal, the promotion, the revenue, the number, the recognition, the thing that you were working toward. And you felt it. You felt that satisfaction, but it was shorter than expected. It was quieter. And then you were already moving on to the next thing without quite stopping to ask why. And that's an easy place to be. Or maybe you didn't hit the goal, but you looked at people who'd realized that it hadn't resolved the question for them either. That arriving at the destination that they were sprinting toward didn't seem to be the end of anything important. The challenge with all of this stuff is if we're chasing something for what it's going to do for us at the end, that's always dangerous language because the reality of it is generally, if searching for a feeling isn't going to come from stuff that we're doing. I know for me, I never reached the full mountaintop that I was after, but I got to a certain point and I started to look around and I said, I don't know that my goals are the same anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that. I wanted to do something that gave me purpose. And in the beginning of my life, that purpose was providing for my family and being there to be part of it. Once I got through all of that phase, then it became more about enjoying a quality of life, right? Less about just pure success and drive and spend every minute that you can working to achieve and accomplish and grow and make more money. It became more about a balance in my life and wanting to feel fulfilled and have peace of mind. And so this one is the quieter, more disorienting things that can happen to a driven person because it's weird. The goal itself was real. It's not like you were chasing something meaningless. The work was hard and the achievement was genuine, but somewhere underneath it, there's a question that it didn't answer, and it wasn't designed to answer. Success can answer very practical questions. It can answer, am I capable? It can answer, can I build this? It can answer, can I provide? Can I compete? What it can't always answer is, does this matter? Am I living in accordance with something I actually believe in? Is this the life that I want to have lived? External validation is real. I don't want to be dismissive of it. Earning recognition from people that you respect, being paid well for what you do seriously, building something that lasts, those things register as meaningful for good reasons. But external validation has a ceiling. It can tell you what you performed well. It can't tell you what you performed in service of something worth performing for. So you could win the game. You could really win the game and still quietly wonder whether it was the right game that you were even playing in the first place. And so for me, that was really what it is. I started to realize that, okay, I was sort of getting to where I wanted to be, but I got to a certain point where I said, I'm not there for other people in my life as much as I'd like to be. I mean, yes, I was there for my specific family and able to provide those experiences and all of that stuff growing up and be present for that. And that was great. But what I realized is all of my external life, all of my hobbies, all of my free time was all absorbed in what I was doing. And while I enjoyed it, there were other things I wanted to do too. So I got to a point where I said, you know what? Am I even chasing something that matters the same way that it did? Sometimes we put the car in drive and we just keep going and we don't even realize that there was an exit back there that we were supposed to take. And so once I stopped to reflect and I realized, geez, my goals have changed. I no longer want the same things I wanted when I was young. I don't have those same needs, but now there's other things I want that I didn't care about then. And that's fine. That's healthy. It's what it should be. So when you have that feeling where you start to analyze, you start to look at and assess what you're doing, what you've achieved, and what really matters to you, it may feel like it's perfectly aligned, which is great, or it may feel like there's a gap. And if there's a gap there, we need to ask ourselves, what is it going to take to fill that gap? Generally speaking, it isn't more of the same. So if we're climbing something and we feel like, well, if I just get to the next level, if that's the feeling we've got, it's most likely fool's gold. And typically it's something else that's missing that we need to find. So we need to sit with ourselves. We need to think about ourselves, and we need to push out all the external world, the expectations, and what logically or like superficially would look like the right success, and really think about what matters to us, right? Because once we get that feeling and we get in touch with that, then we can stop the cycle of when I get there, I'll feel it, because that usually never comes. Because the surprise is that when we do have that sort of anticipation, usually when we get what we thought we wanted, that feeling is smaller or it's shorter than expected. And then we're stuck trying to fill that void with something else. So the next goal, reflex, is another thing we want to be conscious of and pay attention to. As soon as we hit a target that we've set, no matter how long it's taken us to get there, we immediately pick a new target and we pivot without pausing. I'm not suggesting setting a new goal is a bad idea. What I'm saying is we don't want to have our default settings on to a point that we just, by definition, extend the goal or add another goal and not stop to think. When you hit a target you've set, stop, get reoriented, think about what you really want, and see if it's still more of the same or something different. Assess each time you hit a target before you figure out the next one. That's a super important part of things, because a lot of achievement-oriented people, they don't just do ambitious things, they are ambitious people. So the drive is who they are. They start to feel like if that drive is gone, then it's destabilizing, right? Because then what? If this isn't enough, then what do I do? We see this a lot in athletics. Athletes are a young person's game. By the time you hit 40 years old as a man, you're pretty much way past your peak and you're in the twilight of your career if you aren't already retired or gone. And we see it over and over again where somebody gets so much meaning and purpose out of playing the sport, they can't let it go. Even though they see that they're not able to compete at that level anymore, they want to keep trying to grasp that feeling. The successful ones, instead of staying too long and ended up going out on a sour note with their tail between their legs, find something else. They reassess their lives and think about what else could I do that will give me meaning and passion and adjust their focus into that. That's a healthy way to do it. And so it's not about being depressed or burnout necessarily. Those can be involved and they can overlap, but it's just being mature about it, right? When a question starts to emerge that wasn't there, maybe because we weren't ready for it or we just didn't care. So that question, once you hear it, it's really hard to unhear. So, what is the second mountain? The simplest way that I could put it is this: the second mountain is a shift from proving yourself to giving yourself. The first mountain is largely about you, your ascent, your achievement, your identity, your recognition. The second mountain orients outward. It's about what you're devoted to, what you're contributing to, what you're building for someone or something beyond just yourself. And this is not a small shift. It's not a minor adjustment to your goal setting process. It's a genuinely different relationship to the question of what makes a life meaningful. The second mountain is found in different places for different people. For some people, it's a specific mission they feel genuinely called to, work that connects their abilities to a problem that actually matters to them. For some people, it's a deep commitment to relationships, community, family, investing in the lives of others with a kind of intentionality that they weren't capable of earlier. For some people, it's craft, not just doing work well, but doing work with integrity and service of something they believe in without needing the external reward to justify that. Now, here's something important. The second mountain is not soft. It's not a retreat from ambition. People on the second mountain can be extraordinarily driven, probably more driven in certain ways, because the source of the drive is deeper. It's not fueled by fear or inadequacy or hunger or validation. It's fueled by something more durable. The difference is why you're climbing. The first mountain climber says, I want to reach the top. The second mountain climber says, I want to make the climb mean something. So the second mountain can be something where you shift a career. Sometimes it's something completely different than what you've been doing all of these years. And that might not be because you weren't paying attention to it or you weren't giving yourself enough to it. It might be because it developed later in life. We change our priorities, we change our interests, and that's totally fine. Or it might be within the same vertical of where you had your mountain one, where you had all your drive. Maybe you want to turn around and give back. Maybe you want to invest in people that are trying to do what you were doing to help them learn the lessons. You're still working in the same area, but you have a different relationship with it. Because instead of trying to do it for yourself, you're trying to help other people do it. And so any of those kinds of things can be useful. And so the other thing I want to mention is I think it's super important that I'm not talking about strictly volunteering. I'm not suggesting, oh, get your success and then run out and spend all your time volunteering. If that's something that, fires you up, by all means do it. But I'm just talking about whatever it is for you that aligns with purpose. Maybe it's building a garden in your backyard. You've wanted to do it, for a long time. You never had the time. And now you're going to really spend your time doing that. You aren't necessarily, helping other people, but you are doing something that's outward. You are doing something that's also beneficial for your soul in a way that it fuels that, right? It's not all just pure ambition for ambition's sake. And so I think it's super important that, giving yourself to your work in that way, it's not for the means to the end, but it's just for the process. It's for going through it and living it as you go. Because we only can enjoy the time that we're living in the present moment. The past is behind us and we can recall good things. The future's ahead of us and we can anticipate good things. But the only moment that we have to live and to enjoy is right now. And that's the time that we want to spend the majority of that feeling fulfilled and satisfied by what we're doing. So The second mountain doesn't mean that you stop caring about quality, craft, or performance. In fact, a lot of times people get more serious, they get more driven and focused. But the reason, the motivation behind it isn't accomplishment or achievement, it's purpose, it's value. So I think devotion to something in a concept is super important. And, I think that in and of itself is choosing to be oriented towards something that matters beyond yourself. And it doesn't have to be spiritual. Again, this could be something that is, very sort of not esoteric at all and very real. But at the same time, you know, what does it look like in your work for you? What does it look like in your relationships? You know, what things do you wish you had more time for? What things do you wish you invested more time and energy in? Generally, those questions give you clues to what those things are that really matter to you that will give your life meaning. So think about how you spend your time and then think about the things you would do if you had unlimited time to spend or more time to spend, and where would you go with that? Think about people that you admire who seem to have found this, right? Found that balance or found that meaning in what they're doing. What do they all have in common? There's usually a quality of being grounded in something, of not needing external validation in the same way, of doing their work with a kind of quiet conviction. Because the second mountain doesn't always require starting over. It can be, but it can be a reorientation of your existing work. Same job, different relationship to why you're doing it, like we talked about with the mentoring. So the second mountain isn't smaller than the first. It's just differently shaped, and it requires a different kind of courage to climb. So let me try to draw this distinction a little more precisely because I think this one is worth sitting with. Achievement asks, what can I accomplish? Meaning asks, what is it worth giving myself to? Those are very different questions. They're not opposites. You can accomplish things that are deeply meaningful, and you can pursue meaning with serious disciplined effort, but they come from different places and they lead to different lives. The achievement orientation is future focused, the next milestone, the next benchmark, the next level. Progress is measured in outputs and outcomes. The work justifies itself by what it produces. The meaning orientation asks a prior question. Why this? Why now? What does this serve? It's still interested in quality and results in doing things well, but the frame is different. The work is in service of something, and that something is what gives it weight. Here's where this gets practical. A lot of people design their careers entirely around achievement and then wonder why they feel hollow in a role that looks impressive from the outside. The resume is good, the income's good, title's good, but the day-to-day experience of the work has very little connection to anything they actually care about beyond status and security. It's not a character flaw. That's just what happens when you've been orienting exclusively toward one question: what can I accomplish, without asking the other one? And to be honest, the achievement question is easier to answer. It's more measurable. The culture around us has very sophisticated systems for telling you how you're doing on the achievement dimension: money, titles, metrics, followers, recognition. The meaning question, a little fuzzier. There is no leaderboard. But the absence of a leaderboard doesn't mean the question matters less. It might mean it matters more. So when you've done something that makes you feel really valuable and you get meaning from it, I know I don't volunteer enough, but since that's the easiest way to explain it or the easiest example to draw, I know, in times in my life when I think back to things I've done that have given me a lot of satisfaction and made me feel meaningful and important, it's when I've done things in the service of others, when I've done volunteer work, despite the fact that I might have even been dreading going to do it. Once I was there and in the process of doing it, I actually felt really good. And when I was done, I felt even better. And I know even in my career, I've shifted because what I was doing was building something in a really solo way. And I shifted my career into coaching and podcasting because I want to have that connection. I want to be able to give back. I want to be able to share, have a collective voice, and help other people understand that you're not in it alone, right? There's other people that have gone through it and that are going through it. And I'm here to encourage you. I'm here to pat you on the back. I'm here to lift you up and tell you keep going because there is value in that. And when I have that ability to interact with other people, especially if I see they got value or made breakthroughs because of it, that for me creates more meaning than the paycheck behind it. And I think that that's what's really important. I've done a lot of things over the years that have generated a lot of money, but I didn't really feel like the impact was behind it. It was sort of money for money's sake. And I think that is the quantifiable difference. So it is possible to do meaningful work that doesn't pay well. It's possible to do well paid work that's deeply meaningful. The variables are not the same. So you have to decide what creates meaning in the work. It doesn't mean give away all your money or don't care about money or any of that stuff either. You can have both. But the fact is, if you're doing something that gives you meaning, you're always going to feel value, satisfaction, and peace of mind. So the meaning question is partly about who benefits from your work, not just whether you benefit from it. When you can clearly see that the other person, is getting a benefit or the problem that your work serves, the work feels different. And that's what podcasting and coaching is for me. I feel that even reaching one person, sure, I'd love to have a gigantic audience, but the reality of it is, if one person out there is listening and feels like, I was having a down day and then I listened to this episode and now I feel empowered again, I'm gonna renew my commitment and keep going. Fantastic. That is meaningful for me, and that's what it's all about. So think about when in your career you felt the most like your work actually mattered. Really stop and think, sit in that moment for a bit. What was present in those moments that isn't always there now? Because the more you can get clear on that, the more you can dial in on that. And it's a little scary, but it's going to give you the answers to the test of where meaning really is for you. You know, some people will avoid the meaning question because they're afraid that the answer might require them to change something. Look, I'm a titan of industry. I'm killing it here. I'm so successful. What if I sit with my feelings and think about meaning and realize my whole life has just been a charade? It doesn't matter. Lean into it. The reality of it is, first of all, that's unlikely to be the case. But the avoidance is proportional to how much you suspect the honest answer. So if you're avoiding answering that question for yourself and thinking about it, chances are you're the one who needs it the most. Because the reality of it is, you will be able to find what that is that connects with you, and you can find the balance where you can make that work. So achievement can fill a schedule. Meaning fills something deeper, and that's worth knowing the difference. So here's the part nobody really talks about. Moving from the first mountain to the second isn't just a strategic change, it's an identity shift. And identity shifts are hard, sometimes genuinely disorienting, because you're not just changing what you do, you're changing how you're understanding who you are. If you spent years building yourself as someone ambitious, accomplished, high performing, constantly growing, always forward, that identity is deeply woven in how you move through the world. It shapes how you make decisions. It shapes what you're proud of. It shapes how you relate to other people. And when that identity starts to feel like it's not the whole truth anymore, when the first mountain question stops being fully satisfying, there's a period of real uncertainty that can look from the outside like regression, like you've lost your edge, you've given up. You haven't, but it can feel that way sometimes. The identity shift asks you to do something specific, things that are uncomfortable. It asks you to let go of old scorecards, definitions of success you inherited or built for yourself that don't quite fit anymore. It asks you to question the stories you told yourself about what winning looks like. It asks you to release, at least partly, the need to be constantly impressive, to perform for an audience, even a private one. It asks you to listen to quieter signals, not the external ones that are loud and clear, revenue, recognition, validation, but the internal ones. What do you care about when nobody's watching? What kind of work do you come home from feeling like yourself? What do you want to have given to your time to, looked back from at the end? And maybe most importantly, it asks you to choose alignment over applause. Now, that doesn't mean that you stop caring what people think. It means you stop organizing your life around what people think. There's a difference. So I know for me, I've been in situations where people felt like I had accomplished a lot, but internally I felt like a fraud because I didn't really feel like I did that much. And at the time, I thought it was just because I have this compulsive need for accomplishment or drive or whatever, ambition. When I look back on that now, I realize that wasn't the case. It's because what I was doing was not aligned with what I actually cared about. So, yes, I was scoring in all the ways that mattered externally, but internally, I felt like there was something missing. And that old scorecard didn't really quite fit, but I didn't have a new one. And I didn't even really know how to find it. So, I think that when we slow down, when we reorient, when we start getting in touch with those things that matter to us, that might be misread by others as failure or softness. And we have to be prepared for that. But that's fine. It doesn't really matter. Whether that fear is actually about other people or your own internal critic, the reality of it is it's still important to do it. So, there are cultural forces that make that first mountain easier to inhabit and harder to leave because you're always going to get pats on the back for that. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, when you sit down in your, chair at home or your sofa or whatever, you're there with yourself. You're not there with everybody else. So when it's all said and done, if that person isn't happy, satisfied, and feeling like there's meaning and purpose, then there's still going to be something missing. So we celebrate achievement aggressively and have very little public language for the second mountain. So the person navigating it often feels like they're doing something wrong. But the reality of it is, some of the most impressive people that genuinely impactful, deeply satisfied, made a transition like this at some point. It didn't look like giving up. It looked like growing up. The transition doesn't have to be dramatic. It often isn't. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes people don't even really notice it that much because it's not a resignation letter or a radical life pivot. It's more often a gradual reorientation, a slow recalibration of what you're optimizing for. The second mountain doesn't require you to abandon who you've been. It just asks you to stop letting that version of yourself be the only one running the show. I want to spend a few minutes on meaningful work specifically because I think it's one of the most important and most misunderstood concepts in this space. Meaningful work is not the same thing as work you enjoy. Enjoyable work is valuable. Don't hear me, dismissing it. But enjoyment is about pleasure, stimulation, flow. Meaning is something more durable. It can persist even when the work is difficult, even when it's frustrating, even when it costs you something. The way that I think about meaningful work, and I've written about this in depth, is that it sits at the intersection of several things. Your genuine abilities, not just what you're asked to do, but what you're actually good at. Your values, what you actually believe matters, not what you think should matter or what looks good. Your contribution, who benefits and how your work creates something real for someone beyond yourself. And your sense of purpose, the thread that connects you, what you do to why you're here. When those things align, work doesn't just feel good, it feels right. There's a coherence to it. You can explain to yourself at a minimum why you're doing this, and that explanation holds water. So when they don't align, you get a particular kind of fatigue that isn't solved by vacation or promotions or a new project. It's deeper than that because you're spending your most irreplaceable resource, your time, your attention, your energy on something that doesn't fully connect to what you actually care about. And I think a lot of high achieving people know this intuitively. They felt both sides. They know what it feels like to do work that matters to them versus work that just impresses other people. The question is whether they're willing to take that knowledge seriously. The second mountain is, in large part, an invitation to take it seriously. So, when we think about what meaningful work is in our own experience, again, it comes down to that sense of satisfaction that you get, the sense that what you're doing matters, not that it's generating results, but that it matters. And I think that's the big distinction. Work that's meaningful to you and work that you've been told that you should do to be meaningful, which is why I brought up the thing about volunteering, because everyone will tell you that's a great thing. But if that isn't your thing, that's fine. But find something that's meaningful to you because those aren't always the same. And meaning in work doesn't require a perfect role or perfect circumstances. Sometimes it's about bringing a different intention to work that you're already doing. Sometimes it does require a larger change. How do you know which is which? So meaningful work often involves some difficulty and some sacrifice. You're willing to accept that difficulty because the work matters is actually a signal that you found something real. So what is it about the way that the person that you know that has the life or feels the meaning that you want to have do their work, not just the what in what they do. There's a way they do it that's probably different. There's usually a quality of genuine investment, of caring about the thing itself, not just about the outcome. So, meaningful work doesn't just give you something to do, it gives you a reason to show up fully. And that changes everything about the quality of how you live. So, I want to close the main body of this episode with something practical, not a plan, not an action list, but some questions. Because I think the most honest thing I can offer here is not an answer, but a better set of questions to sit with. These aren't quick questions, they're not meant to be answered in 30 seconds or on a commute. Take them seriously, write them down if you're the kind of person who thinks better on paper, and come back to them. So here we go. One, when you've done your work, any work, paid or not, and felt afterward that it genuinely mattered, not impressive, not successful, just it mattered, what was present in that experience that isn't always present in your work now? Two, what have you accomplished that you're proud of? And separately, what have you contributed that you feel was actually meaningful? Are those lists the same? If not, what does that gap tell you? Three, if you removed all external validation from your current work, no recognition, no status, no income signal, no one watching, would you still find it worth doing? What part of it would remain? And what would fall away? Four, what are you tolerating in your work or life because it looks good from the outside, even though you know on the inside it's not quite right? Five, whose life is actually better because of the work you do? Can you name them? Can you describe how? And how important is that to you when you're deciding how to spend your time? Six, what would you build, create, or contribute if you already had everything the first mountain is supposed to give you? The money, the recognition, the security, the proof, and none of that was the reason to do it anymore. Seven, what is the quieter signal, the one underneath the ambition and the momentum that you've been moving too fast to hear clearly? Here's the core of what I want to leave you with today. The first mountain matters. The work you've done, the things you built, the skills you developed, the goals you've reached, they're real. They're not nothing. They have shaped you, they've taught you, and they've opened doors that wouldn't have been open otherwise. Honor that. But the first mountain is not the whole landscape. It was never meant to be. The second mountain, the one that asks a different question, the one that asks what is worth giving yourself to, that mountain doesn't require you to abandon everything you built. It asks you to bring it with you and point it at something that actually matters to you. This is not about rejecting ambition. It's about growing up, maturing it from a hunger for proof into a commitment for purpose, from what can I accomplish to what am I here to contribute. That shift doesn't happen in a single moment. It's not a revelation mostly. It's more like a slow turning, the gradual reorientation of what you're paying attention to, what you're saying yes to, and what you're organizing your days around. But it starts with being honest enough to hear the question. And I think you already hear it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here.